Mr. Renatza and Sheriff Hebert, whoever wants to go first.
Mr. Chairman, members, thank you for the opportunity to present before you today on behalf of the Louisiana Sheriffs. I have the opportunity every morning on a long drive from St. Francisville to reflect and to pray. And this morning I was doing just that because I was extra nervous about this presentation, and I'm going to be quite frank with you. I knew what I was up against. So I literally prayed from St. Francisville all the way to the governor's mansion turn. And in that turn, I realized that I had left my phone at home, and that's why I got to pray the entire time, but without being interrupted.
The Lord didn't hear you.
And the other thing about just that is that, you know, those quick utterances that I made right after that discovery took away those entire 35 minutes of prayer. So, but it's about higher ground. And this discussion today is about higher ground for us, and we feel as an association representing our sheriffs that we always wanted to get to high ground on this issue, and how do we get to high ground is what I'm going to try to discuss. High ground to me means the right moral place, the right legal place. We've taken our sheriffs in our leadership seminar to Gettysburg, and we illustrate the significance of high ground and planning and everything you do in life, everything you want to become successful on has got to be dependent upon taking high ground. On this issue pertaining to where we are in corrections, we were not satisfied with ourselves, and we started the discussion as sheriffs, how do we get to a better place? And we knew that when we'd had this discussion pertaining to per diem, that the conversation was going to be overcome with a discussion of money, when it really should be a discussion of doing a better job, and doing a better job for the people who are in your care, custody, and control. How do we do a better job to break the cycle of criminality is ultimately the best point. How do we reverse recidivism? Louisiana sheriffs release 80% of the individuals who are released from the care, custody, and control of the state of Louisiana. 80% of those offenders are released from our jails. The problem with that statistic is we should be having, from all sincerity, we should have most of the programs prior to the release so that we can successfully help those people reintegrate into society. We oftentimes talk about problems that we have with mental health in Louisiana, problems that we have with physical health, problems that we have with education, problems that we have with single parent homes, problems that we have with substance abuse. All those things act as a part of the overall picture in crime, and when we have an individual in our care, custody, and control, it's how we can better break that cycle of crime. We need your assistance to be able to do a better job with that. Sheriff Hebert is now going to talk about what we did in preparation for this, and that is we went to the American Correctional Association and we asked them to do a study for us instead of us coming to you and saying this is what a survey of the nation is on where we rank with this per diem situation with other states. And we do rank second to last. But we asked the American Correctional Association to do that study, and Sheriff Hebert is going to briefly testify now on that report which you have before you.
Good morning, members and chairman. Doug Hebert, Sheriff in Allen Parish. as Mike said, there was a study done by ACA, a completely impartial study to see where Louisiana ranked on reimbursement for Department of Correction offenders. And first, let me say, of the 32,000 people that are being incarcerated by the Department of Corrections, half of those are in parish jails, a full half of them. So when they did the study on costs and reimbursement, Louisiana was a solid second to last. When we started talking about ways to move from just a repository, and we've had numerous conversations, I and other sheriffs, how we see the same people coming into jail and back out and back into jail. And when we're trying to come up with ways to keep those folks from being repeat offenders, and I'm already subsidizing, and all other sheriffs are already subsidizing the costs to hold state inmates. It makes me start having decisions on whether I have enough patrolmen so I can have enough people to try to get a guy to not come back into my jail and give him a chance on being a solid member of society. Do I cut benefits to another portion of my department so I can figure out how to keep my jail running? So the reality of it is, what we've asked for in the initial deal would take Louisiana's reimbursement from a solid second to last to a just barely third to last in the state. I mean, in the United States. That's where we're at. Any programs we do are done wholly out of sheriff's budgets and with no state. There is no dollar that the state gives to sheriffs to hold state inmates that goes towards rehabilitation. There's no way. There's too many costs incurred with food, medical costs, and all those things, our employment costs. We don't break even. And that's the sad reality of it. We don't break even helping the state hold their inmates, your inmates. And with that,
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to call upon the gentleman to my right now in just a moment, Warden Dennis Grimes from East Baton Rouge Parish, but I wanted to tell you that where the current rate is $24.39, there's a significant number of sheriffs that are providing treatment programs now to help people become, to get high set, for help with people with substance abuse, with AA, and we invest at our own cost, where we subsidize those programs ourselves. The sheriff wears two hats. Really, he wears four, but I'm going to talk about two today. The sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer of the parish, and he's also the keeper of the jail. So when we arrest that individual, when we arrest that offender, our goal is to do so for victims and to get the offender off the streets. But then we turn around and we switch hats and we become the keeper of the jail, and that role is a more compassionate one, in which that individual is now within our confinement, and whatever we can do to make that person whole, to bring them back to where we can reintegrate them back into society successfully, that should be our goal. I know the significance of that is really part of what Warden Grimes does on a daily basis, and I'm going to let Warden Grimes speak to that now.
Morning, Mr. Chairman and committee. I'm Warden Dennis Grimes, Warden of East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff's Office Jail. I'm in 34 years of being in the corrections field. I had 23 years at the state and 11 years at the sheriff's office at the local level. And looking at that, we find out that in the local level, there are people that are coming in, which I call the front door, and in the state corrections being the back door. And even though we're trying to close the back door, it does not happen if we don't do something at the front door. And so what we've decided to do is to provide as many programs as we possibly can to help those individuals that are coming in, to help them get rehabilitated and become productive citizens outside in our society. We have been inundated to do the things that we're doing with less resources and trying to do those things as far as our community, as far as our population, as far as our employees. As far as mental health is concerned, we're tasked with training our employees and getting our employees trained to identify crises with individuals that are coming in, and also to deal with those individuals when they're getting ready to get out and making those necessary steps to get those individuals taken care of once they leave. It's thing that we try to do is to try to turn them around. And what we try to look at is that if they've been here 6 weeks, if they be here 6 years, we want to try to expose them to as much program as we possibly can. Most of the people that come in have opioid addictions, and so we have to deal with those issues. We go beyond what we are as officers and trying to connect families, because a lot of time people come in, their families don't want to have nothing to do with them. They're wore out, they're burnt out from dealing with them, and we try to connect other resources for them and going beyond what we're doing. When I came to East Baton Rouge in 2008, we were at about 2 self-help programs. Now we're at 22, and we're doing that with what we have and with volunteers and trying to make it work. And so we're trying to make sure that these individuals that come in on the front door level gets the resources that they need and be able to go back and be more productive once they get back into society. And so I definitely appreciate this opportunity to speak. And I hope that we get this done to where we can continue to help those individuals that unfortunately are being incarcerated. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Warden. I wanted to simply close and not take up much more of your time by telling you that our sheriffs 100% back this proposal, making this request of the legislature with full knowledge of the fact that since we got this amount, 2439, in 2008. In 2008, the state was spending $45 per prisoner in the state of Louisiana. Today, the state spends $60.09, and that was because the state had to make up for extra costs with retirement benefits, with health care benefits, and with the cost of medicine and the increased cost that we have. We've been unable to pay for those same things for our personnel. The bottom line is we have subsidized the amount where our costs exceed $34 per day. We have subsidized this for the largest part around the state, absorbing that through the Sheriff's General Salary Fund, taking away from other parts of the Sheriff's offices, including patrol and investigations. So what this amounts to and what this costs is that we've had sheriffs in the past years who have had to close down their jails. That happened in Vernon Parish. It also happened in Evangeline. We've had sheriffs that had to contract with privatization because they couldn't pay for those personnel costs, and that's another growing trend. So the future of this, obvious to me, is that we went from almost 21,000 prisoners in sheriff's care post-reinvestment to where we are today, 16,900. So we're at a low point. We're at the point now where we should really look at those programs. We should add the programs because the cycle of crime, because of demographics, because of the crime-prone age group, that cycle is going to go up in a couple of years. So by taking on more responsibilities, by doing a better job, we can help break that cycle of criminality, and we simply want to do a better job.
I'm back. I just didn't want to leave my trust in Tarver. Wasn't you, Mr. Chairman? He scares me. He's an undertaker. He kills everything he touches so he can make money off of it. But all seriousness,
All right, Rich.
I brought this bill because I received numerous calls from, number one, it saves the state money for our inmates to be housed with our locals. Number two, year after year, I received numerous calls from grandmothers, elderly parents, and children asking that their fathers and their sons are closer to home so they can at least visit them, because we know that the rehabilitation process includes reuniting them with family members and then keeping them in areas where when they are on work release, they can have a job when they're released. And that's part of reentry. And that's very hard to do in a lot of rural areas where you don't have state facilities. And that was the second reason. And thirdly, because the state made a promise to the sheriffs years ago and said that if you house our inmates at a lower price, we would pay for them and you won't have to incur that cost. Well, my local sheriffs are starting, and your local sheriffs are starting to incur that cost. They hadn't had a raise in 10 or 11 years. You know, everything in this state budget costs more than when we sat here and came in for our term, and that was 4 years ago. But in 10 or 11 years, they're incurring costs that they could not have thought they would incur now because the state did not keep their commitment. And that's why I brought this bill. It wasn't about giving the sheriffs more money, because it's still probably going to cut even with the way the bill is now, because when I first introduced it, it was just a straight raise. And I'm really asking for your favorable passage, because I don't think that our locals should incur the state's costs when we make a commitment to them. And even with this increase, if this bill passes, the state is still saving money. Because what happens if a sheriff elects that they can no longer house state inmates, those inmates go back to the state, and we pay an extreme cost per day to house them. And so I know this bill has a note on it, but in actuality, if this note would have considered the inmates returning to state facilities, it would have canceled out any costs, even with the increase. And that's why I brought the bill.
All right. Senator Johns, you want to go next?
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Renatza, whatever sins you committed this morning, there's good news. Father Bahi will be in the Senate chamber when we leave here, and I have arranged for confession for you. So,
Prepared to do that face to face, Senator.
right.
I'm not
Face-to-face
Catholic. What can you do for me? If I'm not Catholic, what can you do for me, Senator?
I can.
I don't want Tarver touching me. Everything he touches dies and gets buried.
Seriously, Mr. Renatza, I know that I'm fortunate. I live in a parish where my sheriff is well funded, but I know for a fact that he did his own analysis of what it's costing him to house our prisoners, and it was somewhere in the $36, $37 per day range. He had an outside CPA firm come in and do a complete analysis, but he's one of those. We're one of those parishes that are providing a lot of these additional services and rehabilitation type services, AA and those types, health care, those types of things. So I've been very fortunate. So we hear you, we understand what, and we're going to try to help. So.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Barrow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Renatza, I think I heard you say something that I want to ask you about, because you referred to some of the prisons actually closing. Do you think that if there is no increase that we could actually be facing where, you know, that there are some jails or prisons just that will refuse or will no longer be able to actually incur this cost, additional cost?
We hear from sheriffs on a daily basis that talk about closing doors if there's not additional relief. That is not something that we simply state. That's something that we know will come to fruition. So the other thing that they're doing now, which I didn't speak to, you know, they're looking to fill beds with federal ICE prisoners or help from the marshals. And those per diems exceed $50 a day. Now,
And that just happened in my area. In the Ridgewood area, they just moved out their inmates and state inmates to house ICE
now I
detainees.
know that's in the process. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry that I know that in Wynn Correctional Center that has been discussed with the contract, and I know that a number of sheriffs seek to become certified to hold those federal detainees as well. So where we are right now with overall vacancies, because we're at that 16,900 level, you know, we had over 3,900. Thomas Bickham could testify to the exact number of vacancies that we have in our jails that were DOC beds. But the fact of the matter is, we accepted what the governor wanted to do, what was the will of the legislature pertaining to reinvestment. We also knew that in doing so, that we would have the opportunity to have more treatment programs, and when we went leaner, that we would be afforded the opportunity to do a better job with the fewer individuals in our care, custody, and control. And that's the hope at the end of this day, that we get to do just that. So the ones that hold on, Senator Barrow, they're holding on by a very thin margin. And the mere fact of the number of sheriffs that go before the bond commission, the majority of those requests are for fund balance issues. They're not for capital projects. They're borrowing against next year's tax proceeds to be able to pay in the last quarter of the sheriff's office salaries.
Wow.
And the number one driving force in that cash flow issue, and I know many of you who've sat on the bond commission know we've had as many as 20 applications in a year. It's because of the salary amounts, and it's because of the deficits caused in our jails.
So part of the whole deficit part, when we talk about salaries, so you have a high turnover, right?
Yes,
so
ma'am.
so that's contributing to it in terms of that cost, plus the people that you have to pay overtime to,
Yes,
because of the because this is not a job where you can just say, okay, well, we just not going to let somebody stay or they have to go home. You have to have someone there. You have to have a body there. So that's an additional cost that's actually probably adding to this whole deficit. But I guess my whole issue is, if the state made the commitment and we have not kept our word, then that to me is problematic, because you are keeping your word to us by continuing to house the individuals, and the state actually, I know they couldn't today absorb those individuals. I know that.
Our simple math on the computations on what happened to the state rate in the last 3 years, you average increasing for the state of Louisiana almost $3 per day per offender in state institutions. And that's because you had to, because of those rising costs. You have to do that, Senator. I'm not saying that there's that this is make-believe money.
Yeah.
The expenses are that way.
Everything has gone up. And I know the work, Warden Grimes, that you guys are doing. I know firsthand the work that you're doing there. I have been to graduation programs, and there have been many simple initiatives that y'all have done that I think have gone a long ways with some of those individuals who have been incarcerated. And people think, we just take for granted that individuals know how to do certain things because we knew how to do them, or our parents taught us, but everybody doesn't have the same upbringing. And so there are some things that people just, they are not taught to do, right? And then they end up into little petty crimes that if they don't have the money and no one to help them, it becomes a perpetual cycle, because they get in trouble for something simple, and then their record gets tainted. It's hard to overcome all of those things. And if there's no intervention or assistance, then it just kind of perpetuates and get worse as time goes by. But I know of some of the programs that y'all have done here in Baton Rouge. In some of the graduation programs that y'all have provided.
Yes, we have. A lot of the classes that we do is for individuals that are there that are incarcerated, and trying to send those individuals back out better than what they did when they came in. A lot of them lack education, so we increase our education program. A lot of them have substance abuse problems, so we increased our substance abuse. And we're now in the process of what we've been doing for years is the parenting class, because a lot of them like parenting.
The parenting class is a big one.
So we're doing parenting, we're doing mental health, and we're absorbing all of that to keep that going and being able to do that in what we're doing. We want to see individuals that come in, unfortunately they come in there, but not I think that every person that comes in there deserves a second chance, deserves help, deserves some type of resource when they get out. And we go step farther in far as that when we deal with somebody that's going through a program, and we try to connect them with some resources outside. So we, as a prison, we're going more farther in trying to connect them with some resources outside of the jail and trying to get them, because a lot of time we deal with people that doesn't have housing, people that don't have transportation to get to their doctor's appointments, to get to their treatments. And so we deal with all of that because our goal is to try to help these people not come back to prison.
And so you're going over and above.
So we're going beyond what the local level.
Yes.
I think one thing is that what we thought what the local level was is that somebody come to jail, they're in jail for 2 or 3 days, they either go to court, they're going to the state, or either they back out of jail. That's not happening anymore. People that are coming to prison in local level now are staying a lot longer than what they used to. And so we're providing resources.
But when they don't come back, when they don't reoffend, the savings to the citizens of the state of Louisiana is exponential in more ways than one. On insurance costs for burglaries, on insurance costs for health care, those people that have to go to the emergency room for treatment, funeral expenses, the additional cost of crime that we wind up paying because we've not dealt with that problem successfully continues to prey upon our citizens. A 1 or 2% reduction in the overall rate of recidivism saves substantially to everyone.
And so while we've had a rising cost in terms of, what it takes to actually do this, you not receive that additional pay. But in addition to that, you guys want to be able to add programs to help individuals not recidivize and come back.
Correct.
Because we're dealing with the families, the same families. Sheriffs are a little bit different in that we deal with the same people day in and day out. We know where the problems are, and we know where we would like to address those problems. Well,
I support this bill. I believe that it's the right thing to do. And while we made the commitment and we asked you to join us, and we made a commitment together, and we have not held our end of the bargain, I think that it's time that we do so. And so, Mr. Chairman, at the appropriate time, I'd like to move favorable. I know it's not. Yes. The amendment hasn't even been introduced. I don't even know what the amendment is.
We'll just give them the authorization, yeah. Senator White.
Thank you, Warden. So your local prisoners that are sent to you from East Baton Rouge Parish,
Yes, sir.
how much are you supplementing them out of state general fund for this parish, or out of your funds of the sheriff's office? You're supplementing those, or is parish?
he's asking you basically what do you have to add to pay for the cost of what you're getting. I know you probably don't have that.
I don't have that figure.
Okay. I was just wondering how much we were paying extra. So, but the state prisoners you have, about how many you have in East Baton Rouge Parish?
Approximately right now we have about 80.
About 80?
Yes, sir.
Do you treat them the same as you treat the local ones? Just give them the opportunities to go through the same programs, drugs, alcohol,
Yes, sir.
mental health?
They get the same opportunity.
Do you
same
feed them the
program.
same thing?
Yes, sir.
So you spend the same dollars on the state prisoners that you spend on the ones that are there from East Baton Rouge Parish, right?
Yes, sir.
So, and it's been 10 years, almost 10 years since we've had an increase in per diem, right?
Yes.
Has your expenses went up at that prison in the last 10 years? I know you hadn't been there quite that long.
I would say yes, with what we're having to deal with now, as we, with the DOC inmates, state inmates that we have, most of those already have their time. And so those ones that have their time are putting different programs that we have, but they're all equal to all the programs that we have. Some guys that come in order to be in a program has to have a certain bond amount to be in a program, depending on what their bond is, depending on what their charge is.
So they get to participate in every program that East Baton Rouge Parish pays for also, right?
Yes. Yes, sir.
How those prisoners you get, at your prison, and then we get across the state that we're sending back to the sheriffs. Do you get burglars?
We don't get the murderers.
I didn't say the murderers. I said the burglars.
Yes, sir.
You get armed robbers.
Yes, sir.
You get some that have committed sex crimes.
Some we do, not very many.
So, but you get some of the same folks that are in our state prisons, right?
Yes, sir.
And you have to try to, if we're going to reinvest, we need to put the money in to reinvest and save. And you're saving us money. You're saving us. Every one we send to you, it costs half or less than half for us to keep them in one of our state prisons. Is that true, Mr. Renatza?
I wanted to specifically state on the classification of offenders that you just spoke of. Every violent offender in the state of Louisiana that's committed a crime was booked in a sheriff's facility and spent time in that facility, be that Caddo Parish, East Baton Rouge, Jefferson Parish, or whatever. The fact is, some communities like Jefferson, they move those offenders as soon as they're sentenced out of their jurisdiction. East Baton Rouge attempts to do the same thing. But we handle every violent offense. So it's not like we don't hold murderers. We hold murderers. We hold rapists. We hold people who have kidnapped and committed offenses against children.
Right.
The problem that we have, different from the Department of Corrections, is that when you have the intake process, you have all these people that come into the population that are unsettled, that have to detox, that have numerous problems. So we're dealing with a multitude of problems that the state doesn't have to deal with. We're having to deal with that person who is first incarcerated, and the trauma of that to some individuals is substantial. So we handle every
Detox.
offender.
Yes, everything.
So are you doing the best of your ability for the reinvestment as the state's asked and the governor's passed legislation? Are you doing the best you can for $24 a day?
Yes, sir.
Could you do better for $26, $27 a day?
I think we can do a lot better on some of the things that with the increase in there, especially with our staff and especially with the individuals that we having to deal with daily.
I think with the number of people, it's not talked about a lot because everybody wants it to work. But I think some of the folks that have been released and they are rearrested for violent crimes, we haven't reinvested the dollars or taken those dollars from reinvestment and put them into programs that I think some of the sheriffs have the ability to do all over the state of Louisiana. And most of the ones we're releasing, Ms. Renas, are they coming out of state prisons or parish prisons?
80% of individuals released from prison or jails come from locals. 80% are released from local facilities.
So they're releasing 80% from local. All right, thank you. I don't have no more questions.
Thank you, Senator Wright. Senator Appel.
Yeah, Mr. Renatza, you said something I picked up on, and I think I heard it right. You said that one of the major drivers of this need is because of declining numbers of prisoners. Didn't I hear that right?
That's one factor. The majority of the needs that we have are our personnel costs that have increased substantially in 11 years since we've had it. The real problem being, Senator, when we hire a correctional officer, if they make it to the second day of work, that's a big thing. Because people who oftentimes come to work in a correctional setting have no clue what it's like when that door slams behind you for the first time and you're locked up in that jail, in that prison with that offender. Our biggest problem, as Senator Barrow said, our biggest problem is attrition. Our biggest problem is training. Our biggest problem is dealing with the people who take on the same symptoms and PTSD in that setting.
Let's talk about finance for a second. So if you got a fixed cost, high dollar people, increasing cost people, and you have a decreasing cost number of sources of revenue, doesn't that have a major impact on your bottom line?
We pay in Grant Parish correctional officers $8 per hour. And in some parishes, it could go as much as 10 to 11 depending upon the rank of the individuals. But you would be surprised, Senator, how low those salaries
I
are.
understand, but that's not my point. My point is that with a diminishing number of prisoners, it's got to be hitting your bottom line substantially.
Well,
I'm trying to figure out is and I'm coming to something that I think Senator White was talking about, is we had this Justice Reinvestment Act, and we were told that it was going to actually generate extra money for the state. You guys are asking us for $120 million over 5 years, which I got to think is being driven by a declining number of prisoners, also with your increased costs. So, I mean, am I wrong in my logic?
No.
I mean, the state may be seeing some money, but you guys are asking for a whole lot more on the back end.
Well, I think what was said was that it was going to save the state money and we were going to reinvest some of it in reentry. The thing that's
but it's costing us much. He's asking for $120 million.
And I was going to state that the reason why an amendment was placed on this bill, that the sheriffs that received the last portion of the increase, they would have to make sure that they had the reentry programs that the state passed in the reinvestment bill legislation, so that
they're going to put in education in their prisons. How are you going to get it? I mean,
that's what the amendment said.
You're going to put schools in there. You're going to
No, it wasn't for schools. Our state facilities.
Well, I mean, for
don't have
reentry,
schools.
I understand the drug stuff. That's important, but if you're going to have a prisoner
like
that you're going to come out of a jail and you have an expectation that prisoner will fit into society, they're going to have a skill, a marketable skill. So is that what we're going to be doing?
One thing that we discussed was just making sure all sheriff facilities at some point had GED programs, and I think they do, but the ability to maintain those without us keeping our commitment is an issue. And I'll let him speak on the other program.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out something. It's really the big picture. It's really not you guys. We were told if we did justice reinvestment, we're going to save all this money that we could invest in creating marketable skills. My words. Instead, it seems like because of your costs going up, we're going to have to take the money that we might be saving that we could have invested in marketable skills and feed it back to you guys on the other side. So it's nothing to do with your request. It has to do with the big picture.
I wanted to clear up the picture by saying, had we been able to adjust over the same period of time as the state did with the cost of inflation, had we just got minor increments, then this would not appear to be as substantial as it is now. But the fact is, we did not. We went 11 years without an increase.
Which you guys asked for and which you guys complained about. And that's the thing. This is not about, oh, we're saving money, let's have an increase. The sheriffs have brought this to the table every year that I've been elected, and this is my 8th year, saying we still have not received our increase. We still are below the cost of what it actually cost us to house state inmates. And it was just we were in a deficit for 6 years.
To cut recidivism, and the way you do that is to create somebody that comes out of jail that is drug-free, has the basic education, has a skill that you can sell. And
as we do in Caddo with carpentry, as we do in in West Baton Rouge with air conditioning, as we do in DeQuincy with welding, we get that, and certainly, one thing that too many people fail to recognize, Senator, is that it's got to be a voluntary nature of the offender to want to improve himself.
If they don't want to do it, it's not going to ever happen. So.
And providing to them religious services as well is very important.
Well, and I'll close with this. It just seems to me, and this is the big picture, it's nothing to do with your request today, that we were sold that we were going to have all these savings, but I think it sounds like in the end of the day, because we're reducing prisoners and your costs are fixed or rising, you have to make up for it. So therefore, you're here asking us for all this money, which might offset all the money we might have saved on the state prison side. But that's just my analysis of it. So.
And I just want to reinsert that the sheriffs have been asking to be rightfully increased since I know I stepped in the building as a legislator, which was 7.5 years ago. And so this increase has nothing to do with the Investment Act, although we put the requirement.
I'm talking about total state dollars now. It's nothing, right. Two separate issues, but they become one issue at the end of the day. But I'm okay. I'm okay.
In closing, Senator LaFleur, In closing, and not, I can sense that you're ready. Representative Jackson, if I may, we're holding over half of the state's commitments for care, custody, and control. The savings that we generate because we hold those offenders for you is substantial. It costs you $60.09 to hold that same offender in your care, and you reimburse us for $24.39. That's why it's been at that number since 2008, and that's why we come before you today, so that we can make adjustments, so that we can do a better job, as I stated, so that we can do a better job reducing the cycle of crime for the state of Louisiana, because we're doing it for over half of your prisoners, and that's why we ask for your help today. And thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Anansa. There's no doubt your costs have gone up. Our costs go up every year. We have our own mandated costs that go up. You're experiencing the same thing. I'm imagining from 2008 until today, if you accumulate those additional mandated costs, I don't know what they would be, but obviously there's a huge amount that you've had to eat into what you get paid. At the same time, justice reform meant, probably about 75% of the people that came out of the system came out of the parish jails, basically, and that's why the utilization is so far down in parish incarcerations. And I'm assuming it's going to stay down for a while now that this thing is in place. But what has not gone down is your cost, and that's the point that has been made clear as the bell today. Your costs have gone up. We've never caught you up. You've got certain fixed costs, whether you have 10 guys or 20. I mean, your costs are still there, and we haven't covered them. With all that being said, I don't know how much money we have to help you this year to get it, but we realize we have to do something. We're going to experience some savings. We got $10 million back in sheriff's housing this year that reverted back to the general fund, and I think we anticipate, I think they estimated around $8 million. So I'm going to offer a motion. I'm going to offer up an amendment to keep the $1 increase in the next fiscal year, and then to just reduce the proposed increase in Representative Jackson's bill from 2 to 1. Well, no, we don't have to change year one, do we? It's already $1, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so the amendment would only, oh, you already did it. Okay, never mind. And we would provide for no additional increase in the third year. Again, we know that there's $40 million of additional revenue that we haven't recognized, and I certainly anticipate next year and the year out that revenue will go up, so there'll be more dollars, general fund dollars available to do what we're supposed to do. And I guess the best thing I can recommend is that hopefully we'll do the right thing when we have those dollars, and we make that increase in your per diem go up next year, just like we should do things in higher ed, among other things that we typically have underfunded or just maintained status quo. So, does anybody have any questions about what the amendment does? It'll be a cumulative $2 increase 2 years out. 1 and 1 is what it would be. Yeah. Does anybody have any objections to that amendment? Hearing no objection, that amendment is adopted. Senator Tarver moves that we report HB 5. Okay. Senator White.
Would you read this amendment number 3045?
I think we just adopted this one.
Okay, what's the one I asked you for? You got it? Okay.
Which one is that?
1 and 2.
You have an amendment?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you'll have one? Okay. All right. So members, this amendment would provide, in the second year, instead of an additional $1, it would provide for an additional $2, and nothing in year 3, right?
Nothing.
Okay. It's cost-wise, it's right. Yeah. So the cumulative effect would be $3 in the second year out. So, yeah, my amendment has been adopted. Yeah. Senator Hewitt.
So just to clarify kind of how that would change the fiscal note, the fiscal note on the amendment that we just adopted would increase the current year budget by $6.5 million, and next year and every year thereafter by 12 million in round numbers, I believe. Is that the way you understand it, Mr. Chairman? For the
Yes, it'd
amendment
be
we just
6.8 in the
adopted?
first year, and I would assume 18 million in the second year.
I think.
No, for Senator White's bill. Okay, well then not 18 million, it would be 6 and 12 million, right?
The first year will remain the same, right, with Senator White's
Yeah, the
amendment
first
this
year.
Yeah,
The way I understand is for the amendment we just adopted that Senator LaFleur offered, it would be 6 million for this year and 12 million for next year and every year thereafter.
Right.
The amendment that Senator White's proposing is 6 million for this year and 18 million next year and every year thereafter.
Correct, because it would be essentially an increase in the base price, base amount. It's $6.5 million per dollar, but the dollars accumulate, so it would be 6.5 times 3, so it would be around a little over $19 million, 18 million bucks.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that so we understood the implications of the amendments.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Does anybody have any? Oh, I'm sorry, Senator White. Go ahead.
Okay, so at the number of 2439 current rate, at 21,000, 186 million a year, a day. No, it's 512,000 a day, 186 a million thereabouts. That's what it costs for them to keep them. If they send them back to us, it's $62 a day. It costs us $475,000 as opposed to $186,000. And if we give them another dollar, where maybe, just maybe, me and Mr. Fannin and some of us that come back, we might not have to deal with this every year. I've been dealing with it since I got here. And I would like to have 1 year I didn't have to deal with this. I like to put some things to bed for a while. So their cost, we pay them $186 million a year, cost us $470 million. And they're going to have an increase of up to $18 million. That's a hell of an offset. So with that, I move favorable on my amendment.
Right. And so the goal here to raise their rate is that so we don't have to incur the costs that you're talking about, so that we do get them to keep it.
Right.
So
It's a couple of $100 million more if we take them.
if we take them, that's right. All right. Anybody have any questions about the amendment? So it's 1-2 instead of 1-1 is what it would do. All right. Do I hear a motion to adopt that amendment?
I made a motion.
All right. Senator White moves that we adopt that motion, to which the chair objects. So, Jessica, you're going to call the roll.
Senator LaFleur.
No.
No. Senator Alain. No. No. Senator Appel. No. Senator Barrow. Yes. Senator Bishop. No. Senator Donahue.
No.
No. Senator Fannin. No. Senator Hewitt. No. Senator Johns. Senator Tarver.
No.
No. Senator White.
Yes.
Yes. 2 yeas, 8 nays.
Move favor of the amendment.
And Senator
Oh, okay.
I made the motion.
to report the bill favorably. Gentlemen, you have friends on the committee. We're trying to be realistic, and we want to move the bill forward and
Thank you, sir.
and move the price and the per diem up. And so we're trying to do the best that we can. So with that, Senator Barrow moves that report HB 551 as amended favorably. Without any objection, hearing no objection, that bill is reported favorably.
Thank you very much.
All right.